everybody, either welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're a wine drinker or you just like a good wine at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or some other kind of celebration, what kind of wine do you lean towards? Red wine or white wine? Dry Cabernet, buttery Chardonnay, sweet Riesling, or fancy Champagne? Did you know that your preference or range of preferences can be measured with a chart? When I wanted to try wine for the first time this past Thanksgiving, I consulted the wine sweetness charts for both red and white wine, trying to find out which one would be the sweetest, as I only like to drink sweet tasting alcohol. Based on this chart, I determined that Riesling or Moscato would be my best bet, as it was. Maybe your preferences are similar, or maybe you want one of the drier, more bitter tasting ones if you're watching your sugar and calorie intake. I'm going to analyze the wine sweetness chart so that you can decide which wine best fits your preferences. But first, I want to remind everyone to like my video and subscribe to my channel for more helpful, informative, and interesting videos like this one. Now let's get started! These wines are the most basic and bitter tasting of them all, with no sweet taste whatsoever. The reason for that taste is that these wines have no residual sugar. Residual sugar refers to the sugar that is left after the yeast has eaten a large portion of it in the fermentation process. Of course, each winemaker has a different story as far as the exact amount of residual sugar in their wines, but the wine scale refers to the general range and expectations of each wine variety, no matter what their winemaker. With that, some of the driest of the dry include Pinot Grigio, also known as Grauburgunder. This wine is made from the grape Vitis vinifera and is thought to be a mutant clone of its equally dry red wine counterpart, Pinot Noir. Then there's Bordeaux, the bigger and bolder version of Pinot Noir, named for its home in its namesake region of southwest France. Also in this category are two particularly basic and notable wines, Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Sauvignon. Sauvignon Blanc originates in Bordeaux, just like its namesake wine, and is literally French for white wine grape. Of course, I can't forget to mention Cabernet Sauvignon, which comes from the single most planted wine grape in the world and is basically the child that Cabernet Franc had with Sauvignon Blanc. Any wine with a residual sugar count between 10 grams and 30 grams per liter is considered off-dry. These wines are quite bitter, but they have a tiny bit of fruitiness to them. If you want a wine that has a little bit of sugar, but not an awful lot, these are the wines for you. An off-dry white wine is Chardonnay. Originating in eastern France and named for its namesake green grape, this moderately acidic wine ranges in flavor from apple and lemon to papaya and pineapple and is notable for its buttery aftertaste. A red wine that's on this part of the wine sweetness scale would be Merlot. Bottles and other packaging features for Merlot are usually blue, exemplified in this picture since the grape it's made from is dark blue. In fact, it's because of this dark color that its name likely comes from merlet, the French word for black. Merlot generally tastes very bitter, but has underlying flavors of boysenberry and mocha to help it go down. Another off-dry red wine is one that could almost be considered a relative of Merlot, called Malbec. This is because they're quite similar in terms of taste, color, and origin, but are also quite different. Malbec tastes thinner and fruitier than Merlot and has hints of raspberry and black cherry and tastes smooth and slightly chocolatey on the tongue. Also known as dessert wines, these wines are the ones I tend to prefer. But a little fun fact, they're not called dessert wines because their sugary content makes them a good drink to have for dessert, but because these drinks are usually served alongside sugary dessert treats. These wines are good for beginners or people who can't handle the bitter taste of strong alcohol. But beware the high residual sugar amount in these wines. They're very fattening, so limit your intake. One of the more medium sweet wines in this category is Zinfandel. This Croatian wine grape is grown in over 10% of California's vineyards. Zinfandel comes in both red and white varieties, but its white form looks more like a pink wine, if you know what I mean. Zinfandel in either of its forms can be best described as tasting like candied fruit with a gingery aftertaste. A little higher up on the sweetness scale, we have the dessert wine Moscato, also known as Muscat. Like Zinfandel, Moscato comes in red and white varieties. But whereas Zinfandel is traditionally thought of as a red wine, Moscato is generally considered a white wine. Moscato is unique for having hints of citrus and peach flavors in both its taste and smell. Now for the first wine I ever tasted and one of my personal favorites, Riesling. Although it's generally considered a sweet wine, Riesling comes in drier forms as well. It's unique because it's not usually oaked or exposed to oaks in order to vary its flavor and color like other wines are. Riesling is known for its floral aroma and for flavor profiles of apricot, peach, and pear. Now for the sweetest of the sweet. The following wines have a reputation for being very fancy and for being reserved strictly for special occasions unless you're extremely wealthy. For the most part, this is true, as these wines are very expensive and even more sugary and fattening than the semi-sweet and sweet wines I just discussed. Yet another wine that can be either red or white, ice wine, gets its name from the fact that its grapes are still frozen while on the vine. The frozen water concentrates the grape juice while not freezing the sugar and other dissolved solids. The reason this wine is so expensive is that the production process is difficult and dangerous, making this wine scarce. Named for the French region it comes from, Champagne is notable for its role in a New Year's Eve toast. This fancy drink is drunk out of a fancy glass called a champagne flute. Though not as hard to make as ice wine, the process for making champagne is still quite painstaking and complicated. Apart from this and how expensive it is, another reason champagne is commonly considered a fancy wine is that throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, the drink was commonly associated with royalty. But no, champagne is not the same thing as Prosecco, as many mistakenly believe. For starters, champagne is French and Prosecco is Italian. But moreover, let's just say Prosecco's expensive, but champagne's more expensive because the process of making champagne is more difficult and time-consuming. The two wines are also made from different grapes. Whereas champagne is made with Chardonnay and Pinot Meunier grapes, Prosecco is made with its namesake grape, also known as Glera grapes. They also have completely different tasting notes. Champagne has undertones of orange zest and white cherry, while Proseccos are of tropical fruits, banana cream, and vanilla. Of course, there are thousands of wine grapes and varieties that come from all around the world, but for this video, I decided to just use some of the basic and most notable today. I hope it gave you a better idea of what each variety tastes like so you can decide which one is best for you. Which one's your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!